Greetings, fellow lure enthusiasts. It's Zimtex, and today I'm going to show you how I make this awesome topwater stick bait. So stick around. Now that I've completed my sketch, I want to go over some of the design features of this particular lure. This is a topwater lure. It's going to be a walk the dog style action. I'm making this one for saltwater use, so I'm going to put a through wire, a stainless steel through wire, and that'll give it some extra strength, and the stainless steel will give it some corrosion resistance. As you can see from the side profile and the top profile, this is a pretty round lure, which is pretty typical for this style of lure. But probably the most important design feature is going to be weight placement. And we're going to want to keep that a little bit further back of the center of gravity than normal, and that's what gives it that walking action. Of course, as always, we want to keep that on the bottom, and that's what keeps the lure upright in the water. And the hooks are going to help with that as well. Because our weight's going to be further in the back, it is going to sit in the water a little bit tail down, and that's exactly what we want to see. The other great thing about having the weight near the tail is that it can help prevent tumbling action when you're casting. The next thing I'm going to do while this is still square and blocky is cut the wire slot. Now this particular piece of wood is exactly 2 inches by 2 inches. So I'm going to set up my table saw and I'm going to cut halfway down the length of it. And that'll give me a good place to put my through wire. Another consideration to think about is grain direction. If I cut my slot this way, I'm kind of going with the grain, and then there's a likelihood that the whole piece could split in half. So I'm going to go perpendicular to the grain, like so. I've got a pretty wide groove here because after I ran it through the first time, I flipped it over and ran it through the other way just to make sure that I was centered and even. Turns out I was not. So I've got a little bit wider groove than I need technically, but that's okay. That'll just give me plenty of room to put my wire in, and whatever extra there is, I can fill it. So let's cut out our templates. I did go ahead and mark the center line for all the sides, and that's going to help me line this up correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mark at the end so that I'm offsetting those the exact same distance. Go ahead and mark the top profile as well. So I've saved the two pieces that I cut off, and I'm going to temporarily hold those in place with a little bit of hot glue. That gives me a square block again to cut the other side. Got some safety tape on my thumb here. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I like to kind of cut like this. I do have very good control and have practiced for a long time, but it is a good idea to take every safety precaution that you can. I can't promise that I will always remember to put this on here, but it is a very good idea. Before I start carving the other side, I'm going to lock in the carving that I've done on this side with some super glue. Yeah, of course, this is basswood, and basswood's nice and soft, but that's kind of a double-edged sword. It makes it easy to carve, but it also wants to split. You can see I've got a little split going on right here. So I'm going to protect what I've got with this super glue, and then I'll move on to the other side. Okay, I'm going to get started on making the through wire here for this lure, and we're going to be using this line here that I found off of, I think, eBay, but basically what it is it's 0.080, which is approximately 2 millimeters of 302 stainless steel wire. This is very heavy stuff. I'll mark this tail in black so I can keep track of which end's which, but I marked 9 1/4 from that end, and then I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch on either side of that. Put this right here with my center mark against the post. And I'm going to bend that until it's straight up like that. Then I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it to that mark like so. And then bend all the way around. I want to take these double barrel crimps. These are 2.5 millimeter by 15 millimeter. I'm going to slide it over the ends. Now, I do not have a set of crimping pliers for this, but what I've found that works okay for me for this application is to just use a large metal chisel here. And I'm just going to give it a couple of taps. And all that does is that cinches it down in place. Pretty tight. I'm going to mark the front and the back. Kind of like I did before, I'm going to put a mark 1/2 inch, another 1/2 inch. Okay, this is really important. Before I start bending, I want to put a double barrel crimp on my wire, okay? That's really important. Also pay attention to how I'm aligning this with this loop on this end. So we're going to align this first dot on the post, and we're going to bend that like so. And then we're going to flip it over so that this line points straight to the post. Okay? And then we're going to bend this other piece all the way around. We're going to temporarily hold that in place with our crimping sleeve. Now we can check the fit. That's going to be just about right on length. I am going to have to do some cutting on this tail. I'll have to cut that groove a little bit deeper so that this wire can come out in the center. But that'll be a little bit of a fit and finish thing to do later on. For now, what we're concerned about is the length. Okay, let's go ahead and just crimp that down. So for these big saltwater lures, my preferred method of securing these through wires is with epoxy. But before I do that, I need to tack the ends with some super glue and baking soda because it kind of needs a little bit of a nudge to keep it right where I want it. And that epoxy is just not going to do that. So I'm going to tack it right now. But I kind of wanted to give you a rundown of that before I put my respirator on. That'll securely hold both ends down and the center portion and allow us to pour our epoxy in. That epoxy will flow in and around the wire and all of the attachment points and everything, and it'll just really bond it to the wood a lot better, I think. It also makes some nice little end dams to keep the epoxy from flowing out the end. So I took this over by the heater and warmed it up a little bit while I was stirring it. And what that'll do is that'll make it a lot more liquid. But at the same time, it will reduce the working time, which is fine in this particular situation because I don't have a lot of work to do. So it's more important that it pour around the wire and make a good bond. The thing I like about this particular harness is that it's extremely strong. I'll put a link to another video I did here a while back about saltwater poppers. I did a torture test on it. And this particular setup can hold over 500 pounds, which is plenty. Before we ballast this lure, we need to get the hardware attached to it so that we're achieving the proper balance. For this lure, I'm going to use single hooks. I've got these Owner 7/0 single hooks. So we'll get a couple of those out. These are the triple strong. And then I've got these number 9 Owner split rings, very heavy duty. And these are the ones I use on all my saltwater poppers and my big lures. Like we talked about earlier, we're going to put our weight here in the bottom near the tail section so that sits a little bit more tail down in the water. And that's what's going to give us that walk the dog action, right? Now I'm doing all my ballasting using fresh water in my aquarium here. And I get some questions sometimes about the saltwater density versus the freshwater density. And really what you got to be careful about is it's going to be more buoyant in the saltwater than it is in the freshwater. So if I test this and balance this in freshwater, then when I go to fish it in saltwater, it's going to float a little bit more. It's going to be more buoyant in that saltwater. I'm going to be testing it in freshwater, so it's going to float in both. It'll just float a little bit better in the saltwater. In my opinion, the only time that really comes into play is when you're trying to do a suspending bait. If you're trying to get it to sink at a certain rate or something like that. But for a topwater, if you can get it to float in freshwater, then you're golden for freshwater and saltwater. Likewise, if you're trying to make a sinking lure, that sinks really fast, then just overkill it and put a lot of weight in it and you'll be fine. It's that mid area where you're trying to suspend or sink at a slow rate or something like that that you got to be careful. Before we add any weight, let's see what we got to start with. So it's sitting fairly even. We want it to be a little bit more like that. Okay. After I dry it off really good, I'm going to use my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue some of these pre-made weights onto the bottom. Now I'm going with a 5/8 inch diameter because this is a pretty big lure, so I think we're going to need to add quite a bit of weight. I'm going to do 2. You know, my preference would be for it to sit like that. So I think I'm going to run with that location. I may just put just a tad less in there when I actually do the drilling in the filling. Drilling in the filling. That wound up being a little bit lopsided, but that's okay. It's gonna work out in the end. We'll fill it up and cover it, so it should sit all right in the water anyway. Once we've let that cool, we can cover it up with some super glue and baking soda. And I'll admit that's a lot sloppier. That back hole is a lot sloppier than I would like, but there's really not much to do about it except learn from it and try to be a little bit cleaner next time. So let's get those covered and that'll seal it back up, and then we can put the hooks back on and test it again. Yeah, that's a little bit more like what I wanted. Not super steep. But you know, that's a matter of personal preference. Some people like them to sit almost straight up and down. That's fine. I think that's right in the range where we want it to be. All right, I'm going to go over this again. I do this in just about all my videos, but I get more questions about it than anything else, so I'm gonna talk about it again. What I've got here is an aluminum mesh that I got from a hobby store, but I've found some and I've got them linked in the description. It's a craft type mesh, and I just cut out a piece and I've taped it to something, you know, portable here. It's just a calendar that I've got. But what I'm going to do is I am going to orient this so that the diamond pattern will be up and down on the lure. I'm going to tape it down so it doesn't move around very much. I'll go ahead and do both sides. And then you can see where I've got the gill pattern kind of scored in right here. I don't want to rub on that. I don't want to get any scale pattern on it. So that's why it's marked, so that I can avoid it. But I'm gonna come in with my thumbnail and put that pattern on. Once we've done that, we can carefully pull it off, and you can see we've got a really nice scale pattern on there. I'm going to use the squishy part of my thumb to define the gill plate area. Then we can come in there with our embossing tool and just trace everything. I'm going to add some stippling detail just for cosmetic reasons. I'm going to put a little bit of rubbing alcohol on this foil here, just to make sure that I don't have any fingerprints on it, any oils, anything like that. I'm going to paint some of this Pinata ink on there. This is the, what color is that? Sunbright yellow. And we're going to paint that over the foil here. So one of the things I really like about this ink is that you don't lose the luster and the shine on your foil. It's a real transparent coat on there, so you can see that this is still very, very shiny, but now it's more of a gold color, and that'll be a good base for the next coat of paint. But before I do that, I'm going to put a clear coat on this, so that I can conceal the seams of the foil. And then once I've done that, we can come back and we can start putting layers over it to finish up our paint scheme. But that makes a good foundation. We're going to get started with some opaque white, of course. Now let's hit it with some fluorescent green. So this is where we're at right now, and the camera is not really picking it up, but it is super green on the top and the bottom. And the next step for me is to blend these together with some iridescent green. We're just going to we're going to spray over this green, and we're just going to kind of blend it over the gold, because what I'm trying to get to is like a metallic yellow green. This is going to be another one of those things where you're going to have to paint a coat, dry it, paint a coat, and just layer it up slowly. And then you can ease up to the appropriate level of green that you want. So I think that's about where we want it to be, green-wise. We're going to put some iridescent scarlet onto the belly. It's really an orange. Just going to put just a little blush of that. Not much, just a little kiss of it right there. As you can see, our clear coat has cured, and we are ready to do the final layers of paint here. I'm going to go over the top with a little bit of black, but I want to maintain a scale pattern. So what I'm going to be using is, I got some new mesh here. This is a plastic material, and actually got it from the grocery store. It's what your garlic comes in, these little bags of garlic. But the benefit of using this over the actual wire is the wire will scratch particularly paint, but it'll actually even scratch into the clear coat here, whereas this plastic will not do that. Okay, so I'm going to stretch this over and clip it down. Okay, the critical thing I want to do is make sure that my mesh is touching along the back here and along the sides, because that's where I'm going to be painting. I don't want any gaps between the mesh and the lure. The other thing I'm going to do is kind of check alignment, because I can kind of shimmy that around a little bit with my fingers right now, but I want to get the diamond pattern kind of where I want it first before I start my painting. And for this, we're going to be using opaque black. You want that to be really good and dry before you take the mesh off. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. You could leave it like that, or you could come back with some black and just do solid down the back and let it fade out. I've done it both ways. I think I'm going to leave this one as is. Put just a little dab of water on it, and I'm going to clean this paint off of the gills here. Again, this is only possible because I put a clear coat over it. Without the clear coat, you wouldn't want to do this. I'm probably going to do 4 stripes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Our color for this first stripe is going to be opaque white. I'm going to use some opaque black to finish up this detail here. It's time to put the eyes on this thing, and I'm going to be using these red colored ones, the Brule Outdoors. These are the Smalley 10mm. And again, a thicker super glue would be best for this, but I'm just working with what I've got for now. Okay, and now we'll apply our water slide decal. If you're new to the channel, these are linked in the description below, but these are water slide decals for like building model cars and planes and things like that. You can buy a sheet of this paper, you can print your own decal on it, and then there's a spray you put over it to seal it on there. But we're just going to soak that in some water for just a second. We're going to dab it off on both sides. And then what you can see here is this will slide off the paper like so. Okay. And then you just roll the moisture out with your Q-tip. I am really at the point of putting clear coat on, but I've decided that I am not happy with this face marking here. So I am going to take that off with a little bit of water, hopefully. So I'm thinking that the reason I didn't like the face markings before is it was just too much. So I'm going to try again. I like that a lot better. Well, it casts it flies tail first through the air, which is nice. If you like the content I'm putting out, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and give me a thumbs up so I can make more of the stuff you want to see. Also, feel free to leave a comment. I welcome your feedback and appreciate all of your support. Thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.